All right. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Melbourne, councillors of our city, it is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 3rd of March, and I declare this meeting open. I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. Councillor Dr. Ball is joining the meeting remotely via Zoom. Can I just please confirm we have a connection with Councillor Dr. Ball? There she is, up on the big screen. We are meeting on the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for over 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable, ensuring transparency for all. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. We commence this evening's meeting with a condolence statement for Simon Harvey, a great community leader. So I begin with the sad news from our Kensington community. And it is with great sadness that we note the unexpected passing of Simon Harvey on the 27th of February. We extend our sincere sympathies to his partner Moira and his family as they grieve this loss. Simon served as chair of the Kensington Association from 2019 to 2023 and was a long-standing resident of Robertson Street. He was a tireless champion for his neighbourhood and his dedication has left a lasting mark on Kensington. He was a strong advocate for community voices and good planning practices, particularly for the Macaulay urban renewal area and also the expansion of green space in the neighbourhood. His long efforts are reflected in the Chelmsford Street Park, set to begin construction this year. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, and in ongoing discussions to open further green space along Stubb Street and Moonee Ponds Creek corridor, which he was highly passionate about realising. Among other initiatives, he was also an active member of the Kensington Community Network and the Kensington Reconciliation Action Group. To support civic participation in election years, he regularly hosted many Meet the Candidate events, which were quite well known. During the COVID-19 lockdown, he went above and beyond, setting up specifically themed online programs aimed to help people stay connected during the pandemic. What a community champion he was. He was also a passionate writer, penning monthly articles in the local newspaper where he shared his reflections on local issues and life with great insight and warmth. He will be greatly missed by his family. He'll be greatly missed by the community of Kensington, and he'll be greatly missed by us here at the City of Melbourne and Town Hall. And I know I say that on behalf of all councillors, including Councillor Griffiths, who's very active in the Kensington community, and previous councillors such as Kathy Oak and Rohan Leppert as well, including myself. We've all felt Simon's advocacy over the years. Thank you also to Kate Kennedy, current chair of the Kensington Association, for her thoughtful condolences and continued commitment to local residents. Vale Simon Harvey. Okay, we move on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act, please disclose the type and nature of your interest prior to consideration of the item. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 22 held on Tuesday, the 17th of February 2026. Thank you, Councillor Raf Camillo. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Ball, I can see your hand on the screen. Agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there any matters arising from those minutes and anybody wants to call out? I'm casting a special eye to Eagle Eye. Councillor Ball, no. Okay, we move on therefore to submissions and correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules in relation to agenda item 6.1, Red Stairs renewal. We have a request to speak from Tony Penner, and we have items of correspondence from Tony Penner from the SRA and Jeremy Vincent from the Yarra River Business Association. In relation to agenda item 6.2, Fisherman's Bend Place Naming Framework, we have a request to speak and an item of correspondence from Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum. In relation to agenda item 6.3, the Melbourne Innovation and Investment Board, we have an item of correspondence from David Willis. And in relation to agenda item 6.4, organisation-wide grants and sponsorship policy, we have a request to speak and item of correspondence from Ariel Valent, North and West Melbourne Neighbourhood Centre. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item. Now, can I ask, is there anybody here this evening who wished to speak to any agenda items before us who did not hear their name called out in that list I just ran through? Very good. We move on to agenda item 5, public questions. A 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and the end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Members of the public may either submit questions in writing or register to ask a question in person or via video link. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration, and I remind members of the public that this is not the time to make submissions. You do that later on when the agenda item is before us. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 3 public questions received, 2 of which will be asked in person. 3 written public questions received, 2 of which will be asked in person. I note that in reading out these questions, we are not attesting to the veracity or factual nature of any statements made. I will now invite Chris Truman to ask a question. Over to you, Chris. Please make your way to the lectern. I remind you to please keep your question to no more than 90 seconds.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Flinders Street between Swanson and Elizabeth Street has been closed to general traffic for years now due to Town Hall station constructions. During that time, the city has continued to function. Traffic is redistributed. The sky has not fallen in. We now have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to decide what this street should be, not what it used to be. This block sits between Melbourne's busiest pedestrian corridors, 2 major rail stations and 3 high-capacity tram spines. It's not a strategic through route for cars, but it is strategic for people. Keeping it car-free would complete the missing east-west cycling link between Exhibition Street and Queensbridge connection to South Bank and Capital City Trail. Right now, these high-quality lanes simply dissolve into stressful gap. This block can fix that. A bike-permeable pedestrian mile would remove vehicle conflict at one of the city's busiest intersections, improve safety for all ages and abilities. It would support train-bike integration at Town Hall and Flinders Street stations and increase foot traffic and, importantly, economic activity for people who work there. Create flexible civic space for events and everyday life. We've already tested the concept unintentionally for years, and it works. Rather than reverting to 20th century traffic patterns, we can deliver a 21st century public, people first, safe, vibrant and connected. This is Melbourne's chance to create Bourke Street Mall for the southern CBD, but one that welcomes bikes as well as pedestrians. Over to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Chris, and thank you for your interest in the improvements to our city core. This question falls in the infrastructure portfolio, so I will respond as the lead in that. Look, the eastbound section of Flinders Street between... And can I begin by saying thank you for the provocative question as well. It's a very good one. The eastbound section of Flinders Street between Elizabeth and Swanson Street reopened to vehicles as planned on Saturday, the 28th of February. So we are in our first week of seeing traffic resume in an eastbound direction along that street. The westbound section is scheduled to be reopened at the end of June 2026, and that is something that is part of the state's agreement with Cross Yarra Partnership, and as we have seen on other parts of that project, once it's in the contract between the Victorian Government and the project deliverer, woe betide any person who wants to make changes to that. I know from personal experience, but your point is a very good one about the city looking for opportunities to make our city more pedestrian and active transport friendly. Indeed, we do have future plans for a new cycling route along that corridor. Exactly what that looks like will be the subject of community consultation, and there are a number of options there. I also have noted with great interest and, dare I say, delight over the last week that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has flagged the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street in central London there, or North London. Oxford Street, of course, is the high street of London. You could even describe it as the high street of Europe. I think it's probably the busiest retail strip in the whole of the continent. And if you can pedestrianise a street like that, then gee whiz, you could pedestrianise any street in any city, you would think. I also note with great interest what Sydney has achieved with the pedestrianisation of George Street, which has unlocked $8 billion of new investment in the central city and has been one of the most extraordinary urban projects in this country over the decade. And, congratulations to Clover Moore and the City of Sydney for that visionary project. A lot of doubters along the way, but now it is really delivering in spades. So that's a long way of me saying that pedestrianisation of the inner city is something that we are very, very interested in here at the City of Melbourne. And our budget is not far away, and let's hope we will have more to say and hear about that then. Thank you, Chris. All right, our next question is from Chris Thrum, who we fondly refer to as Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum. Please make your way to the lectern, Chris, and ask your question. I don't think I need to remind you of the rules, but for those who are wondering, your question must be no more than 90 seconds.
Thank you, Lord Mayor Nick Rees, Councillors Management, and thank you, Chris Truman. It's a hard act to follow that question for sure. This is a reiteration of a question that gave to the City of Melbourne on the 3rd of February 2026. And it's for the local music venues in Melbourne. And the question that I posed to the councillors was, we need to bring in live music parking permits. Live music venues in the City of Yarra and the City of Port Phillip, in partnership with Music Victoria, offer specialist parking permits that allow performers access to the loading zones to drop off and pick up equipment. These permits help reduce the risk of parking fines for musicians loading in inner city Melbourne. And so I pose the question, Could the Lord Mayor and City of Melbourne consider working together in partnership with Music Victoria to introduce a similar policy of transferable permits for reloading and loading in musical equipment in the City of Melbourne? And I emphasise to, I think, Councillor Philip Liliu that we're looking for a parallel kind of arrangement that you've got happening in Yarra and the City of Port Phillip.
All right, thank you for your question. I'll refer that to Councillor Philip Liliu, who is our lead for arts and creative industries here at the City, passionate advocate for the sector. Over to you, Phil.
Ni hao ma.
Ni hao, Chris. How you
Hao
going?
hao.
Can I just ask management, have we actually talked to Music Victoria? Anybody? It might be...
Councillor, I'd have to take that on notice. Our team have been working with the parking team, so the creative team and parking team have been collaborating on this one at the moment.
Yeah. Chris, know your answer, know your question. We do have one, and it's pretty much the same as what we mentioned last week. But how about this? I'm keen to maybe get the team to have a chat with Music Victoria, but also have a look at what is in Yarra.
Yep.
And then we can email you with based on what we've found. If there is warranted or need for kind of potentially exploring that, we can have a look at it. But we just don't have enough information and everything. Sarah's just came on board this week or last week, I can't remember. But why don't we just leave that one with us? And thank you for following up. I'll make sure there's enough scribes here that I'm sure that you'll be minuted and passed on to me and remind me to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I think it's very warranted that we parallel the endeavours of Yarra and City Port Phillip.
Sure. I think in
thanks.
time, potentially, we might actually be all one council and one happy family soon.
Well, that's open for debate whether that's a good or bad thing, actually, Councillor. Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you for that. All right, our next submitted question is from Fana Ahmed, who's well known to us here at Town Hall. And she's written quite a long question, which I will paraphrase. She begins, on Tuesday, the 17th of February, traders at the market were told of a planned electrical shutdown by the council's company QVM Pty Ltd. This was short of the legal requirements for notice, although the company had been informed and involved in the planned shutdown for some weeks. The short notice has not been explained. And then Fana goes on to explain some of the extensive consequences of that lack of warning on market traders in quite a lot of detail. Then goes on to ask the question, how did the council's precinct renewal team monitor cool room temperatures for food safety when there were no temperature displays working, as they are digital and need power to work, and the cool rooms were all locked, so you can't measure the internal temperature? Secondly, she asked, what is the reason the council's precinct renewal team routinely conduct planned works for Lendlease and manage to protect its business interest, but repeatedly damage the trader businesses at the market with planned works? Now, there's a prepared response. I'm looking to you, GM Rick Kwasik. Did you wish to respond to this? All right, over to you.
Thank you for the question, Fana.
She's not here. I just read her question.
Oh, okay. In relation to the question regarding monitoring of cool rooms, most of the cool rooms and fridges had digital temperature gauges. Some of them didn't, but most of them did, which allowed electricians that were there to monitor the process, monitor the temperatures when generators were supplying the power. Electricians adjusted generators' outputs as required to maintain operating temperatures. Where technical issues occurred, these are identified and addressed as quickly as possible. In relation to the question regarding approach to planned works, Minimising impacts to traders is a key priority for all planned works, and delivering renewal works is something that will often result in impact to traders. While significant planning is undertaken, in this instance, all things didn't go as planned. We are reviewing our consultation process and notification of traders to ensure we better coordinate and prevent this type of thing from happening again.
Thank you very much for that response, Rick. We now have about 5 minutes or so left for public questions. Do any folks here with us this evening or joining us in other ways have a question? Please make your way to the lectern, introduce yourself and ask away.
Good evening. My name's Callum. It's just in regard to Vic Barracks and the Carlton ADF building. I reckon it was a fortnight ago you said you do a report or an idea into what could happen to it, and I was just interested how that's going and if that report might be done by the end of the month. That's just my question.
Yeah, great question, Callum. As you know, the Vic Barracks sale by the Defence Department is something that the City of Melbourne is keeping a very close eye on. I will actually be in Canberra later this week for the Capital City Lord Mayor's meeting, and I won't be missing the opportunity to do some advocacy for the City of Melbourne with key decision makers about the sorts of things that we want to see as part of any sale process. And of course, as we have discussed in this chamber previously and agreed on as a council, that includes ensuring that the community infrastructure needs for South Bank and some of the open space needs for South Bank are incorporated and understood upfront so that they can be part of any sale process and then hopefully delivered for that community. At the City of Melbourne, we've done a lot of work in that regard. We have developed a community infrastructure needs assessment in 2024, which includes detailed analysis of the sorts of community infrastructure needs in that area. Equally, our open space analysis has identified key open space requirements for that part of Melbourne as well. And so we are in the process of finalising what and that list of priorities should be the absolute top priority for the Commonwealth for consideration as part of that sale process.
Was council doing a really specific, what I got the impression a fortnight ago that you were doing a real, what we could do with the precinct. Is there a report which will be what the council thinks you could do? I might have got that wrong a fortnight ago.
Yes, so that is something. So I think your question is the City of Melbourne planning to do, for example, a master plan for the barracks that we could advocate to as part of the sale process? We haven't made a decision about that at this stage. We haven't made a decision against doing that, but we haven't made a decision to do that. At this stage, our focus is on understanding clearly what the community infrastructure needs are, what the open space needs are, circulating those needs to the Commonwealth, testing what their response is, and indeed seeing what the broader plans are for the sale. I think once we have an understanding of that, we'll have an understanding of what further work might be needed from the City of Melbourne. But Callum, I want to be really clear with you and anyone who's interested in this issue that we are making it known loud and clear at the highest levels of government in this country that the City of Melbourne wants a seat at the table in this process, and that there are very clear community needs which need to be a priority as part of this process. And sorry, the one other thing I haven't mentioned which I need to is, of course, the extraordinary heritage of these buildings and their history in the defence of our nation. And so anything that occurs on this site needs to preserve, protect, enhance those assets for future generations to be able to enjoy and reflect on.
Cool. I'm more informed because of your answer, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, Callum. All right, well, we're at 5 minutes there we're at 15 minutes there for public questions. Of course, those who wish to stick around, there'll be an opportunity for further questions at the end of this meeting. We now move on to agenda item 6, which is reports from management. And there are 4 reports from management this evening. The first of those, agenda item 6.1, is Red Stairs renewal. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? I think it might be worthwhile, Rick, just getting an understanding of what the latest thinking is around the design for the refurbishment of the Red Stairs, and it might also be an opportunity to comment about consultation as well. So, who would like to present on that? Luke. Okay, Luke Flanagan, please make your way to the lectern, current Director of City Design, to make a brief presentation. Over to you, Luke.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and good evening, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and members of the public. I'm going to give a somewhat brief presentation and overview of the Red Stairs renewal for Southbank and the basis for management's recommendation about how best to proceed with renewal of the stairs in the adjacent area of Queensbridge Square. You can see on this slide they're well recognised, somewhat iconic, and one of Southbank's most visible features and informal gathering spaces, the Red Stairs on the south side of Queensbridge Square. Next slide, please. And the purpose of this project is really to revitalise the stairs in the adjacent area of Queensbridge Square, aligned with council plan goal for building a city for people, and actions from the open space strategy light touch review about enhancing urban greening and the city for capital city purposes. Next slide, please. The Red Stairs were commissioned in 2005 by the City of Melbourne, originally as a temporary measure, a bit of a red carpet iconic gesture for the City of Melbourne when Southbank was being redeveloped. And they also served to cover the entrance of the Crown Casino car park, which runs along Southbank Boulevard and then underneath the centre of Queensbridge Square. Positioned on the southeastern side of the square at the intersection of the promenade, the boulevard, on the southern side of the square itself, on a culturally significant site adjacent to where the old former falls were on the Yarra River Birrarung. They function as everyday seating, an events edge, a viewing point onto the square, across onto the river and towards the city skyline itself. Fairly iconic, but also built as a temporary structure, so now very much in need of renewal. There's strong community interest in the Red Stairs due to safety concerns, amenity concerns and cleanliness of the structure itself. And for this reason, in August of 24, the City of Melbourne's Future Melbourne Committee approved the Red Stairs to be a part of the design competition so for the upgrade. So pending post that decision, detailed investigations were undertaken for the stairs themselves, for the structure, for the surrounding area, which lead us to the recommendation from management tonight. Next slide, please. The real aim of this project is to create a lively, green, safe and durable space for the stairs and for the adjacent Queensbridge Square, supporting cohesive design language along the promenade, maximising green space, improving sight lines and renewing the structure, and then extending the structure's lifespan. Next slide, please. Post the approval for the design competition to commence, so our team here at the City of Melbourne started doing assessments about the nature of the structure and the adjacent area within the square. And what we found is some pretty significant constraints on the stairs themselves and on the adjacent area of Queensbridge Square. Limitations on the structure's load-bearing capacity, significant a number of services in the adjacent Queensbridge Square area, overhead catenary lighting, and very much the condition of the stairs themselves, which means they need a renewal in the more immediate term, rather than what would be aligned with a design competition timeline for a larger renewal of the square itself and the stair structure. Next slide, please. And for that reason, we have developed a draft concept plan for consideration by FMC tonight, which takes us off the track for a design competition for the Red Stairs in the adjacent square area and proposes to undertake a renewal in the more immediate term of the stairs themselves in the adjacent area of the square. You can see on this slide what we're proposing is new trees, new understory planting, garden beds, which are then visible from the promenade itself and tie into the Promenade Stage 1A design language, which has just been completed. Following the design of the promenade to create a very cohesive design language for this area, aiming to reduce the visual bulk of the structure and remove the top room, which has been subject to break-ins by members of the public in recent years. Recladding the structure to create a more interesting and durable structure for people to use, refinishing the bleachers and the seats and steps themselves, and then exploring the potential for softening the bleachers and then making a more inviting space for people to come and dwell. Next slide, please. And you can see on this slide an artist's impression of the key moves that we're looking to make adjacent to the stairs. So more tree planting, more shade, more garden beds, more opportunities for people to sit and spend time adjacent to Queensbridge Square and South Bank, removing the top room of the stairs so they're more open to view lines around the area, recladding them so they're more durable, looking at opportunities for climbers and more green infrastructure and space adjacent to the square, and then refinishing the bleachers and the stages themselves. Next slide, please. And on this slide, you can see an artist's impression of the draft concept design, which would look to further develop post decision by this committee, which looks at the opportunity for recladding the stairs, something like timber or a similar sort of material. So they're more inviting for people to come here, spend time, use them passively. They still work for events and for busking. And then we can align with that council objective about Melbourne as a garden city, combined with the actions from the Open Space Light Touch Review, which is about enhancing green infrastructure through hard areas of the city. Next slide, please. This is an indicative program post-decision by this committee about the timeline for the potential delivery of the square. I won't go into this too much. It's very much subject to some further investigation and the development of the project. Next slide. And that leads us to the recommendation by management, which is to not proceed with the design competition which was approved in August of 2024, and instead proceed with the development and then delivery of a renewal of the Red Stairs in lieu of that design competition. So we're looking for this committee to approve the draft concept for the Red Stairs renewal, authorise the General Manager to make minor changes to the design, and then proceed with that as a way of renewing the Red Stairs and then enhancing this area of the city. That's all for the presentation. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Luke. So under this timeline, when would you see the newly refurbished stairs being open for Melburnians to enjoy?
Thank you for the question, Lord Mayor. I think that'd be subject to our annual planning and budgeting process, but I think in terms of the timeline for development, we'd be looking at developing this project further, engaging with targeted stakeholders over the course of the coming 12 months. And then post that, as we go through development of the project, we'd be looking at the potential for starting delivery next financial year and pending budget allocation. Delivering through that financial year, potentially into the next year, looking at the best opportunity for the delivery of this in terms of timelines for events in the square as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Luke from councillors? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks for the presentation, Luke. So one of the reasons why we are not proceeding with the design competition is there is a view there is some urgency to finding a solution for this space. Given that, it sounds like from what you've just said, these works may not be completed until 2028. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think, so the need for the renewal is really that we need to focus on it now. The structure is in a fairly dilapidated state. And I think while there's timing associated with developing the project and then moving towards delivery, depending on the cost of the work and how complex it is, that'll come out of a lot of assessments of the existing structure. We'd look to proceed with it as soon as we can, again, pending the outcome of the annual planning and budgeting process to allocate budget to this project. I think what we would also understand is that the timeline for running a design competition would probably be a little longer than that. And then at the end of that, we would need to form that into a project that the City of Melbourne could then deliver, which would probably see it delivered on a longer timeline than our more immediate works.
Rick, welcome your contribution on that. I mean, I think as a council, we're keen to expedite things, get it fixed and fit for purpose as quickly as possible. What can we do on that score?
Through you, Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, thank you for the question. we would propose to proceed as soon as we could, subject to this decision of council, move into a design development and detailed design phase. As we do that, we would engage with key stakeholders within the precinct, and subject to the budget process, we would move through into that design process and to tender within this financial year or towards the end of this financial year, and then move into construction in next financial year. Sort of, I suspect, towards the second half of next financial year.
And that would be be aiming towards a completion of the refurbished stairs in the calendar year 2027?
Yes.
Okay. I think that goes directly to your question, DLM. Councillor Guest.
Lord Mayor, so Rick, can we just cut to the chase here of next steps where it says confirm funding sources? Can I from that assume it's currently not budgeted for? If that's the case, can you give us an idea, please, of where we'll be sourcing the funds from? May well be a good idea, but I think we should have some insight as to how we'll be funding this.
There's an allocation or a budget bid in the current budget being considered by council or being built by council, and that's funded over 2 financial years, this coming financial year and the subsequent one.
All right, thank you for those presentation, Luke. We have some requests to speak, and I would now like to call on Tony Penner, South Bank Residents Association, from the mighty South Bank Residents Association. Requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. A reminder, please speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Councillors, South Bank Residents Association has long expressed scepticism about the proposed design competition. Concerned it would delay meaningful action on this site. Nearly 2 years later, those concerns appear justified, with little tangible progress towards resolving what many residents consider a prominent eyesore and safety concern. We raised the following matters. Detailed investigations. The report states that detailed investigations were undertaken to understand the potential design interventions. SRA requests that these findings of these investigations be made public. A design competition, by its nature, is intended to explore possibilities and respond to constraints. The identified site limitations, the car park entrance to Crown Casino and the placement of essential services, were not new conditions. These constraints existed prior to the endorsement of the competition. Why were these not fully interrogated before resolving to run a competition? Has council effectively preempted what a competition might have delivered? Extending the lifespan of the structure. The report proposes to extend the lifespan of the structure. It is unclear whether council has concluded that the community wishes to retain the structure at all. Previous consultation indicated strong sentiment that the red stairs, in their current form, should be removed. The repeated use of the term renewal suggests an assumption that the stairs will remain, albeit modified. SRA questions whether this reflects current community expectations. South Bank Boulevard Stage 6 consultation. There is no reference to the findings from the South Bank Boulevard consultation during which this site featured prominently. Why has that body of community feedback not been referenced or incorporated into this report? Given the Director of City Design's involvement in transforming South Bank Boulevard as the team project lead at that time, it is difficult to reconcile. These feedback should have been included to inform this forum. Luke should be intimately familiar with this feedback, which was overwhelmingly that the stairs should go. I would like to remind you, Stage 6 was joining the river. This is a barrier to that outcome. The proposed concept. The draft concept appears largely cosmetic. The removal of the upper room and replacement with a viewing platform raises a simple question. A viewing platform to view what? Given the prominence of Queensbridge Square, this proposal lacks ambition and design inspiration appropriate to the location. SRA is concerned this may represent a stopgap solution design resolve to resolve an agenda item rather than deliver a considered outcome. Queensbridge Square occupies a culturally significant site adjacent to the Yarra River, Birrarung, and near the historic location of the falls. This presents an opportunity to create something meaningful, a design that acknowledges country, reflects the site's layered history, enhances civic identity. Water feature maybe. We urge Council to undertake further targeted community and stakeholder consultation before finalising the design. If this is to be the only opportunity to intervene meaningfully in this space for the next 15 to 20 years, it should result in something that truly reflects the significance of the location, not simply a reclad structure. Before proceeding, we ask that Council refers this project to community consultation before finalising what this important site will ultimately look like. We do consultation before draft concept designs. It seems we're doing it reversed today.
Thanks for that, Tony. And I might invite Luke or Rick to respond. Councillor Ball, I noticed you've got your hand up as well. Are you okay to get through this line of questioning before we come to you? Good, okay. Luke or Rick, who wants to lead us off in responding to that list of questions there from Tony Penner?
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Tony, for the questions. There were quite a lot of questions there. The project was considered very much as a renewal project because of the condition of the stairs at this point in time. To run a competition process does take some time, and to run further engagement will also take a fair amount of time. And as Luke outlined, it would extend the time frame before we would be able to enter into construction. By undertaking this work, it doesn't preclude some of the outcomes of South Bank Boulevard and also South Bank Promenade, both key pieces of work. One thing that also needs to occur at an appropriate point in time is to look at Queensbridge Square and the bridge and the interconnection of all of those spaces to ensure that the outcome is appropriate. What we're doing at the moment is a renewal project to address the condition of the stairs in their current form, which are proven to be a concern in terms of their safety and amenity. This project allows us to do this in a cost-effective way and doesn't preclude any of the future work from occurring.
All right. There's a couple of other questions there. What about the Tony Penner suggested the complete removal of the structure consistent with the South Bank Boulevard plan? Are there any issues with the complete removal of the structure?
Through you, Lord Mayor, below the structure itself is a concrete structure, the entrance to the car park. So there is a constraint there that requires something to be put back in that location. Luke may be able to provide additional information on that, given his knowledge of the square and the structure, but essentially there are constraints around just leaving nothing there at this point in time.
Luke, did you want to add to that? Okay. And then, look, your final point was about community consultations. So there's going to be an amended resolution going up shortly, which I think will address that, Tony. All right. Any other questions about the red stairs from anyone here this evening? We've got okay. Back to you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you. I was just wondering if Luke could outline the accessibility considerations of this design, and whether it would benefit from being considered by the Disability Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Dr. Ball, and through you, Lord Mayor. I think so. Accessibility has been considered as a part of the development of this project. There's a ramp on the south-western side of the stairs that allows access up onto the middle platform. I think we can coordinate with the Disability Advisory Committee in terms of more feedback from committee members and look to incorporate that as we develop the draft concept through to detailed documentation prior to delivery.
Thank you. So there's no ramp at present that would represent improvement in access?
There's one ramp on site, but I think we could look at opportunities for improved accessibility to the different levels of platforms and stages for the stairs.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Luke. Good answer. All right, if there are no further questions, I will request that the recommendation from management come up on the screen. I don't think there's a mover or seconder for that, so I'll now request that a amended motion please be put before us. That is the amended motion. I'm going to move that. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. So tonight we are considering a new and more practical approach to renewing the red stairs at Queensbridge Square. Last August, this committee endorsed a design competition for the upgrade. The structure sits above the Crown Casino car park entrance, and essential services run through the area in complex ways, and that structure actually is used for housing some of that equipment. Unfortunately, these constraints have limited what we can deliver, which is why management has decided to go ahead with, as recommending to us, that we maintain the stairs structure, housing important equipment as it does, but that we refurbish the stairs, modify the structure, and all up make it something that serves the South Bank community and the many millions of people who walk along the South Bank promenade. Community sentiment has been clear. We've heard you loud and clear, Tony. People want this space improved and quickly. For several years, residents have told us the red stairs feel unsafe, unclean, they're run down, they're not inviting. You bake when you sit on them in summer, you freeze on them in the winter, and the structure has well and truly reached its end of life. It might have looked trendy and cool back in the 1990s or thereabouts, but it's no longer suitable for modern Melbourne. I do want to thank the South Bank Residents Association and the Yarra River Business Association for submitting this evening, and I do want to reassure the community that further consultation will take place during through the next design phase, which we will ensure occurs with this additional clause in the motion tonight, where specifically the Yarra River Business Association, the South Bank Residents Association, South Bank Residents 3006, and other key stakeholders will be involved in the design development. I should stress we don't want this process to go on for too long. We recognise that we are looking for speed to solution, or to be more specific, speed to a good solution here. So there will be further consultation, there will be design workshops, etc. But we're going to keep our eye on the prize, and that is the delivery of new and refurbished steps during 2027. In terms of the new design, I think there are a lot of features that are really welcome. It's a far more inviting structure than what was there previously. The top room has been removed, so the structure is no longer near as high. It may not be clear in the renders, but there's a significant lowering in the height of the structure, which will significantly improve the linkages from South Bank Boulevard and the sight lines through that part of the city. There is also high quality materials that will be used on the new structure. So gone are the dilapidated red panels, replaced with new natural-like materials, timber, stone-like, durable materials that will, again, make the structure so much more inviting, natural-looking. It will very much soften their appearance and make them a place where people want to dwell, get some rest and respite, maybe watch a busker and just watch Melbourne go by, because it is a great square, Queensbridge Square, and we want to make it a place where more people choose to spend their time. And I do think the new design, with all the features that we've heard about this evening, noting that there's still further resolution to go, which will occur with or targeted community consultation, I'm confident will deliver a good outcome for Queensbridge Square, the residents and businesses of Southbank, and the broader Melbourne community, and particularly with those new trees and green space and greenery around that structure. I think it's going to be very, very appealing. On that note, I'll throw to you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As the Deputy Portfolio for the Infrastructure, I'm pleased to second this report today. I would also like to thank the both associations in here, the Southbank Residents Association, the Yarra River Business Association, especially to even bring that information on what was 10 years ago. And it's always important, the input of someone from the community, and remind us of the importance of the consultation too. So the red stairs at the Queensbridge Square have been a prominent feature, as Lord Mayor mentioned, on Southbank since they were delivered in 2006 in the Commonwealth Games, and they have served as a well-known meeting place with this precinct. However, the red stairs, as we know, have been reached at the end of life. So, as a portfolio for safety, I think it's my duty and share the infrastructure with the Lord Mayor that while the council previously endorsed the design competition, further investigation revealed the significant site constraints, including the underground service. Of course, we knew, but now we have repairs that no longer we can be waiting. We need to be getting something done. In this current council, we are here to get things done. We try to make things happening. So the draft concept design before us this evening present a new vision for these stairs. While this has been a lengthy process, as I mentioned, it's crucial that progress continues to address the safety and amenity concerns, taking into account the constraints of this site. So that's why I support the Lord Mayor to put this amended to. Propose within this amended item 714 to guarantee that community feedback is taken into account as part of the design development. So I look forward to seeing the delivery of this important project and finally see some concrete outcome after 10 years. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo, and thank you for your advocacy in particular around that Amendment 7.1.4. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this agenda item? No. In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. All right, we move on to agenda item 6.2, Fisherman's Bend Place Naming Framework. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No, then I will call on Chris Thrum, who has requested the opportunity to address this committee in relation to this matter, to please make his way to the lectern and to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
I've got a couple of images that I'd like to put up. Put up the first one. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Lord Mayor Nick Rees, councillors, management team, general public here, viewers and listeners. This is agenda item 6.2. We're looking at the Fisherman's Bend Place Naming Framework, and I'm here to talk about advocating for Metro 2 for the underground train line to be installed as soon as possible, and for the tram line to be installed as well to really accelerate development there at Fisherman's Bend. Thank the team for the work that you've done on this. It's an immense amount of work. First of all, I'll say we're on Wurundjeri country. This is the Kulin Nation. Melbourne Town Hall sits on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. Now on the screen there, you can see that it's a painting from the City of Melbourne Art Collection. It's by Josh Muir. He's a Yorta Yorta Gunditjmara artist, and we loved his work. Beautiful artist. And it's called Dudagala Before Batmania. Now, there's a complex history to the City of Melbourne in regards to settlements, developments, and what have you. And in the ambition to fast forward and fast track the development of this place, illegal settlers moved up here before they were given the official go-ahead. And people like John Batman came up here to start a sheep ranch when they were told not to, but they came here anyway. They were illegal settlers. They called this place Batmania. And it was very, very hard and extremely difficult for the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and the Boonwurrung people to see cattle and sheep trample all over their country. Now, the thing that is important to remember is that Governor Burke did not give permission for them to come here. And when Governor Burke found out that they were here and that there were 9 cargo ships travelling up from Tasmania to here, he did not approve, but he needed approval from London to start an official settlement, and that took a long time. By the time that William Lonsdale got here to start the official British settlement, it was September of 1836. He arrived here with 2 cargo ships, 70 tonnes of equipment, and that was the start of the official build. Could we have the second image up now? That is one of the first maps of Melbourne. That's the Hoddle grid. That's drawn by the surveyor Rob Robertson. And he did that in consultation with Robert Hoddle and Governor Burke when Burke came down here to name this place. Burke named this place Melbourne after the British Prime Minister. And Batman and Swanston, they expressed a desire for this place to continue to be called Batmania. And Governor Burke said, no, I'm going to call this Melbourne. So it's a very complex history, but that's a fantastic map. There's a lot of detail in that. But I do again thank the management team for the work that they've done for this.
Thank you for that, Chris, and thank you for that fascinating historical map as well. All right, I will now call on a councillor to move a motion. Let's just get that up on the screen. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and looking for a seconder. Councillor Philip Leilua, are you happy to second this motion? Yep. Confirming? Yep, you're a seconder. Okay, back to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for your submission. I am a big believer in your desire to see more public transport to Fisherman's Bend, but unfortunately that is not the matter before us tonight. It is the Fisherman's Bend place naming framework, and I'm very grateful for your submission in relation to that as well. We are now tonight considering the adoption of the Fisherman's Bend place naming framework, which came before this committee in July 2025. We are now considering adopting it following community engagement. The framework gives us a clear, localised approach to naming new roads, new parks and public places across Fisherman's Bend, in line with the Victorian naming rules. And as a naming authority, it is our role to administer proposals and submit them for approval and gazettal. Now, Fisherman's Bend, as many of you already know, is on the precipice of rapid growth. Across the employment innovation area and the Lorimer precinct, there are around 84 new public places, including 60 roads, 20 parks and 4 other public places that will need names over the coming decades. And a consistent and meaningful naming framework is essential as this precinct develops. Last year, we endorsed the draft framework for community engagement, and following that process, we received 119 responses. To all of those people, thank you. Approximately 79% of them were residents. A number of them were key stakeholders in the precinct. In the place naming framework, there are 2 priority municipal and 3 precinct naming themes that were put to the community. The precinct naming themes were industry and innovation, sand, water, scrub and wildlife, and diverse community character. The priority themes were women who shaped Fisherman's Bend and connection to country. And although we have considered this proposal before, I did want to say something briefly about that priority theme of women who shaped Fisherman's Bend. This framework details a number of potential women who should be recognised. And to my shame, they are women who I had not heard of before. They include Diane Lamar, who was the first female engineering graduate from the University of Melbourne back in 1944. She went on to help shape the Aeronautical Research Group based in Fisherman's Bend, later to become the CSIRO. These are the stories that we should be telling through place naming, and these are the stories I hope we will tell through place naming if this motion passes tonight. It is proposed that major roads, parks and public places created over the coming years will adopt names from these priority themes, while minor roads and parks will take a name from either the priority or the precinct themes. It's worth noting community feedback was largely very positive of those 119 responses. Most respondents felt the themes captured local stories, found the framework easy to understand, and I also wanted to note there was support from the Department of Transport and Planning, Development Victoria and Geographic Names Victoria. The collaboration of those entities, of course, will be important for these naming proposals to progress. Overall, this is a thoughtful and practical framework that reflects local stories and will guide decision-making in decades to come. It also, importantly, positions Council to fulfil its statutory obligations with clarity and consistency. Can I, in closing, thank all of the people who made the time to engage with this from July to September last year, and of course our team, led by Evan Council, for their extensive work. I commend it to my councillor colleagues.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillor Philip Leilou.
Thank you, and I also echo the sentiments. Thank you to the team for putting in a lot of the work and going through the many rigorous insights that come from it, but also going through the portfolio. I do hope that going forward we do have a right balance going forward, and there is a lot of industry history in there, and I would hope that that is also remembered. And just for cheekiness, we probably should name one of the roads Tram Road because it's missing a tram, right? So anyway, let's go over there. Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phil Leilou. Insightful and humorous at the same time. All right, are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this item? Look, I'll just say at a very high level that there are too few streets, parks and important public places within Melbourne that are named after the great women who helped build this city, Aboriginal people and in First Nations language. And so it's good to see that in Fisherman's Bend we will have an opportunity to, in some small part, start addressing that. And it was also very pleasing to see that that this proposal, of which a lot of work has been done, and I do thank the team for that, was resoundingly supported by community and stakeholders. All right, on that note, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, Councillor Dr. Ball, Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Leilou, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths. All those against, all those abstaining, Councillor Guest. All right, that motion has passed and we move on. Agenda item 6.3, the Melbourne Innovation and Investment Board. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No. In that case, I will call on a councillor to move a motion. I'm going to request the motion be put there. That is the one. Do we have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Kevin Louis. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Andrew Rouse. Back to you, Kevin Louis.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This report is the next stage after the Future Melbourne Committee of the July 2025 adopted the new City of Melbourne's new economic development strategy, the Melbourne Advantage. This strategy this strategy will succeed the current advisory board, the Invest Melbourne Advisory Board, by setting up the Melbourne Innovation and Investment Board. So for that to happen, it's a bit complicated. Tonight we're endorsing the extension of the Investment Melbourne Board until the 30th of June 2026, so that good work can continue from the current board members. While in the process, we endorse the terms of reference, which is very important, and also we go out and for the recruitment process for the future board members and other specified members, such as our state public service representative, our federal government representative, and I think members from academia and the multicultural community, plus of course our esteemed colleagues, up to 3 members from council. It's important to note that the Invest Melbourne Board has, since 2022, has provided very valuable advice to City of Melbourne on an honorary basis. It's rare that we can get people with such qualifications and as such passion for Melbourne to be able to provide their time and their expertise. And we're hoping that now with the, still trying to remember the name of it, the Melbourne Innovation and Investment Board will be able to continue and follow in the footsteps. But in the meantime, I think I need to thank certainly Mark, your team, all the current board members, and over the last few years, the previous board members for the work and the contribution that they have provided. Most importantly, we look forward to the recruitment process being smooth and coming back in June of this year so that we can adopt the new board members and also give thanks to the investment board members that we have that may not wish to continue or and retire. So thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Louis. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and very happy to second this motion. For those of you who don't remember, in the middle of last year, we of course passed the new economic development strategy, which is a big, important day for Melbourne because it finally moved us beyond the dark shadows of COVID recovery and finally building towards the future of Melbourne. And of course, the board that we're putting together tonight ensures and holds our feet to the fire in delivering the important elements in that document. I consider that document probably the most important thing that we will do as a council, more important than our council plan, because long after our council term has ended and the impacts of our council plan are done and dealt with, and the next council group moves in, the impacts of what we set up for our future economy will be felt for decades. It is a clear decision that the future of Melbourne's economy no longer lies in gold or wheat or sheep or, God forbid, whales, but it says that we are going to back ourselves, and it tells the world something that we already know, that Melbourne is full of innovation and that we are going to back the amazing, unique advantages that we have, and that is the ingenuity of Melbourne. Now, one of the problems that we are facing as a society at the moment as we tear ourselves apart is that we're not having enough conversations about how to build that future for Melbourne. God forbid, I turned on the radio this morning and all the conversation about what is best for this country and what is best for this state was dominated by picking apart the number of Instagram followers the Premier had. So making sure that we, as a level of government, have a dedicated group of experts, of Melbourne's best and brightest, who can support us in making sure that we are doing what is best, not just for Melbourne today, but what is best for Melbourne going forward, is a really important part of the role that we as local government will play in this. Excitedly, Melbourne has now overtaken Sydney in terms of venture capital investment in startups. However, there is an underlying part of that story that's saying that it is speaking very much to the maturity of our ecosystem, but there is so much more that needs to be happening at a smaller level because a lot of those check sizes are very large, and it demonstrates there is an opportunity, if we do not seize it through things like this, that we'll be failing to maintain that momentum going forward. So I am very excited to commend this to my councillor colleagues. For the first time in Melbourne's history, we've declared that innovation is here and it's home, and it's very much here to stay in Melbourne. Thank you.
Thank you for that spirited contribution, Councillor Rouse. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? No, in that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. Councillor Camillo, over to you.
Very quick, Lord Mayor. Those are things that make me happy be a councillor in the City of Melbourne, because we discuss innovation and investment. Those are things that our city is crying more and more for us to be sitting with business and in our community, and now more than ever innovation. And I think I'm very pleased to support that and seeing that council bring to the table more and more. I want to see council bring more and more elements and groups like that to help our economy and help Melbourne to progress. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor Camillo. Any other councillors like to speak to this item? In that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. All right, we now move on to agenda item 6.4, organisation-wide grants and sponsorship policy. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No, in that case, I will call on Ariel Valent, the great Ariel, from the North and West Melbourne Neighbourhood
Lord
Centre.
Mayor, pardon my interrupting. I thought we had asked for a presentation.
No, but any councillor can request one. I don't believe there was expression of interest on that.
Okay, fine.
All right, back to you, Ariel, from the North and West Melbourne Neighbourhood Centre. Welcome back to Town Hall. Great to see you here. And just a reminder, please speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors. Yes, I'm the director of the North and West Melbourne Neighbourhood Centre, one of 4 neighbourhood houses that works in partnership with City of Melbourne to address the needs of our local communities. Our organisation is a proud partner working with City of Melbourne on a wide variety of programs, from homework clubs to our award-winning community newspaper. We've been the beneficiary of a number of grants and sponsorships detailed in the new policy, mostly in the community focus area, but we also receive sponsorship through Event Partnerships Program for Queensbury Cup and have received a social enterprise grant. Overall, I support the proposed organisation-wide grants and sponsorship policy. It is a sensible approach to consolidate City of Melbourne's various grants and funding activities under an overarching policy, making it clear to councillors, staff and the broader community the parameters of these programs. The investment of $15.2 million each year is significant and will have myriad tangible outcomes. I would like to see dollar commitments to each focus area to clarify City of Melbourne's commitments and safeguard minimum investments in each area. The framework and the associated financial commitment shows that Council understands that to solve the issues in our city and to reach the aspirations of M2050, City of Melbourne must work with and empower its partners in the community. However, I am concerned that in a clear departure from the previous community grants and partnerships framework, neighbourhood house partnerships agreements are specifically excluded from this policy framework. These 4 partnership agreements cost City of Melbourne a little more than $400,000 each year. This investment translates into many $1 million of community value. In 2024, our neighbourhood house received $103,000 in City of Melbourne partnership funding, and according to a Deloitte's study, returned $1.6 million in community value. The reason given for excluding the Neighbourhood House Partnerships Agreement from the policy is that the agreements are not competitive. However, there's no specific logic that suggests competitiveness should be the defining factor in determining inclusion in the policy. On page 18 of the policy, it states, over the next 4 years, the City of Melbourne's Community Grants and Partnerships program will focus on partnering with residents and community groups on projects that build social connection and resilience, celebrate diversity and our multicultural communities, and help make our city fairer, more welcoming and great place to live. That term, community grants and partnerships, describes exactly what the Neighbourhood House Partnerships agreements do. So I'm calling for the Neighbourhood House Partnerships program to be included in the organisational-wide grants and sponsorships policy. And if councillors decide not to do that, I request that the future Melbourne Committee explicitly state that as part of the motion, City of Melbourne's financial support for neighbourhood houses will continue under current arrangements for the life of council plan, or preferably on an ongoing basis.
All right. Thank you, Ariel. Some very good points made there. I just want to see if anyone in our management team, Rushta Halith, our GM, I can see you there. Did you want to respond to some of the points made by Ariel? Please remain at the lectern, Ariel.
Of course. Thank you very much for the question, Ariel, and through you, Lord Mayor. First, I wanted to say that we value the incredible partnerships that we have with the 4 neighbourhood houses in our municipality, and there's incredible outcomes that are delivered for community through your work. The decision to not include the neighbourhood grants program as part of this policy is that we tried to refine and simplify the policy to include competitive grants, as you've articulated. That doesn't in any way take away from the funding commitments we have with the current with the neighbourhood houses. So our current funding agreements are 4-year agreements that end on the 30th of June 2027, and our intention, as per previous cycles, when these grant agreements come to an end, we'll do a review in partnership with the neighbourhood houses to see how we can further strengthen and continue to deliver those outcomes for community. So look forward to some of those conversations.
Hopefully some of the things we've learned from this process around reviewing our competitive grants can feed into other funding agreements that we enter into with organisations like highly valued neighbourhood houses. There was also a question you had, Ariel, about you were looking for a specific funding commitment to each of the focus areas. It might be worth getting a response on that point as well.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just on that specific point, with the development of the organisation grants policy, we've outlined in the policy the overall funding commitment that council makes to grants overall. In our review and looking at how other capital cities in particular manage their grant programs, there's some flexibility there's more detail included as part of the annual planning and budget process with regards to grants and sponsorships. So we followed the same pattern where the overall funding commitment exists, but it allows for agility through the annual planning and budget cycles should councillors want to consider how those funds are distributed. So we've adopted that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And thanks, Ariel, for your interest in this policy process as well. Much appreciated. All right, now, Councillor Dr. Ball, did you have a question? I thought I saw a hand up there.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I did, but it's been answered in the discussion proceeding. Thank you.
It's always wonderful when that happens. All right, if there are no further questions from management, I will request that the management recommendation is put on the screen. I don't believe there is a mover or a seconder for that. And so I'm looking to you, Councillor Guest. Do you have an alternative motion which you wish to put before us?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do have an amendment to management's proposal, and I should foreshadow that I believe there will be 2 other potential amendments as well, one from yourself and I think one from Councillor Ball, which is all good and appropriate. This amendment that I'm putting forward arises out of...
Sorry, can I just check? Do we have so you're moving...
Yes.
I think we'll describe this as an alternative motion to give you maximum freedom for further things that might evolve in this debate.
Certainly.
So you've put an alternative, you're moving an alternative motion now. Is there a seconder for this alternative motion? Councillor Philip Leilou. Okay, back to you, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Okay. On the one hand, I'd like to commend management on their proposal for tonight's grants and sponsorship policy. It is a step in the right direction in terms of better governance and transparency here at City of Melbourne. because it is only with good governance that we can foster the trust of the Melbourne community, including the long-suffering, the often unheard and ignored Melbourne ratepayer. That the current policy is to discuss these items in secret in what we call closed session is an affront to good governance and to those that pay the bills, especially when those paying the bills don't see much of a benefit. Given the current forecasts and assumptions shown in our rate, it shows that our ratepayers are set to pay even more in the coming 12 months than was budgeted last year. And that, when you combine that with what's being proposed, we owe them more. All my amendment is asking is for us to publish the recommended applicants on the previous Thursday, as with the other agenda items. Is this much to ask? If it were City of Melbourne strategy to put out a strategy document, we'd receive this and release it to the public with at least a week in advance and possibly more. All as I'm suggesting is we give the public the opportunity to scrutinise who was asking for what on the previous Thursday. I have to say the pushback against this transparency has been extreme. In my view, it is a case of shame on us if we can't get there. You will no doubt hear a number of arguments against this call for transparency this evening. It shows, in my opinion, a lack of respect to the ratepayers of Melbourne. I'll leave it to you to decide if you think that they're genuine or something else. But for one who is concerned, this is a big test of us as councillors. It's about transparency. It's about giving an issue of the local municipality. I'm not the only person to call for transparency. It's happening in at least two other municipalities. Stonington and Frankston have called for complete reviews of their governance policies. And I'd have to say, if this amendment is blocked, I'll have to consider that as something we should be doing here at City of Melbourne. But that is the reason for this. I don't think it's beyond us. I think we can do it. I think it's the best for all of us here to make sure that we have maximum trust from the community of how we're spending their money.
All right. Thank you for that. Councillor Philip Leilou? Nothing to add. All right. I'm going to speak against this motion. Councillor Guest.
Lord Mayor, can I ask a question?
You can ask a question at any stage of
Thank
proceedings.
you very much. There was a mention there of increased rates, just so there's no confusion in relation to the public. Can we clarify what was meant or the truth of the matter in regards to unexpected rate increases?
Certainly. In our budget, about approximately 12 months ago, we forecast a rate increase of 2.5%. You'll see in our forecast now it's rising to 2.75%. And if you factor in the 1 year discount that we're looking to make up for, you'll find that the rates are going up in excess of 5%. And I think that will come as a shock.
Would you like, or can management respond to the claims?
Mans, do you want to respond to that? And I must say I'm still struggling just to make the connection between the transparency on this policy and the claim about rates rise, but maybe you can help us make that connection, Mans, or Owen Councillor Guest can make a further contribution.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through you and Councillor Guest, welcome any further follow-up questions if you choose to do so. So when we forecast our budgets, at the point we forecast our budgets over a 10-year period, we do not know what the rate cap is going to be that is set by the state government. So our forecasted budget that was adopted proposed a 2.5% rate cap from state government. The rate cap that was actually released was 2.75%. So alongside the other local governments, I think 79 in total across Victoria, we all apply the 2.75%, which has been released by the Minister.
Thank you.
All right, okay.
And sorry, to answer your question, the connection is, as I mentioned, ratepayers seeing a benefit to what we're doing. Transparency should be a given, but right now we're increasing rates by more than they're going to expect. I don't think they're going to see a particular benefit to how their funds are being used and appreciate things being done in secret. I'm sad that is a hard concept to grasp.
All right. Councillor Ball.
Sorry, only because it's difficult for me to interject from here, I want to foreshadow an amendment, but happy for this debate to proceed.
All right, thank you for that. Well, let's proceed with the debate. I'm going to speak against this proposed amendment, I have offered you, Councillor Phil Lowe. Can I just clarify, Councillor Laylu, you don't wish to speak to this amendment? Yeah, just clarifying that point. So I'm now speaking against it. And in speaking against it, I also foreshadow an alternative motion to the one that is on the screen at the moment. If this motion fails, I will look to move an alternative motion for councillors to consider. And look, I will possibly speak about this at length later on in this debate, but this is a very thorough review of our grants and sponsorship policy that has been undertaken. It does a lot of things to establish common standards across all grants, sponsorships and value in-kind support. It clarifies roles and responsibility. It embeds stronger accountability measures and does a lot of positive things on that front. One particular thing that this amendment would do is take the opportunity to consider competitive grants in closed session away from council, and that is something that I cannot support. There's a balancing act for council to consider. On one hand, the benefits that come from something like that being debated in open session versus the potential negative consequences that can flow from that. I should say there's been a very long-standing practice here going back many, many years of the City of Melbourne considering competitive grants in closed session, and indeed many councils do exactly the same thing. And the reason why councils approach these matters in this way is because, firstly, it removes the embarrassment for organisations who might miss out on receiving a grant through a competitive process. That, of course, can have a very material impact on an organisation. Often organisations are applying to more than one level of government for grants or to more than one source, approaching philanthropy and others. And if it's a matter of public knowledge that they have missed out on a grant that they applied for at the City of Melbourne, that might prejudice their ability to be successful elsewhere. Also, if you are disclosing the content of their grant application, that might contain sensitive information, commercial information, which organisations don't wish to have out in the public realm, and that might limit or shape in a negative way the nature of the grant applications we get here at the City of Melbourne. The other thing is that this alternative motion would have the list of successful applicants, or at least the list of applicants who management are recommending for grants, made public on a Thursday, and it wouldn't be till the Tuesday night that councillors would be considering that list of publicly known recommended organisations for grants. That would create a number of days for potential heavy-duty advocacy and lobbying, which might actually have a not positive impact on the deliberations of the council. And it also would mean that we have the spectre of many of those groups potentially turning up to the council meeting and putting their case, thus putting a lot of pressure on councillors and potentially creating councillors having considerations beyond just the merits of the claim in their considerations. And secondly, potentially creating an unedifying scene where groups who believe that they were going to receive funds then have council telling them in an open chamber that they're not, and potentially having other groups who may not have been recommended for funding, but councils have decided are deserving recipients of funding, then finding out that they're getting funding, and that could create all sorts of unhappiness across the community. So putting all those things together, I do think there is good reason for the very long-standing practice that has existed here at the City of Melbourne around having some confidentiality around these processes. Of course, noting that if we accept the motion that will be put up shortly and is consistent with the policy recommendations of officers, we will still have lots of transparency in our processes. Of course, all the successful recipients will be advised as quickly as possible, and that information will be made available as quickly as possible after the vote of council as well. So for those reasons, I can't support this alternative motion that's before us this evening. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this alternative motion? Yes, you can ask a question.
So just one question, either to Alliston, the CEO, or management. You did correctly say, Nick, that there are other municipalities that did also hold their grants and sponsorship policies in such a way using closed sessions, but could I just clarify, there are also councils and municipalities that do it the way that I'm suggesting in this amendment, using open sessions.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your question. Councillor Guest, yes, that's correct.
Councillor Ball, we can see your hand up. Over to you.
Thank you. A point of order, I think. Certainly a question about process. Because this has now been moved as the substantive motion and you're speaking against it, if this motion were to fail, then the whole motion is chucked out and we can't re-put the substance from management. Is that correct? I think, might I suggest that...
No, that's not correct, Councillor Ball, and I have foreshadowed in speaking against this alternative motion that if it fails, I propose to move a further alternative motion.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the alternative motion that is before us? No. In that case, we'll put the alternative motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Councillor Guest, Councillor Camillo, and Councillor Lei-Lu. All those against. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rouse and Councillor Dr Ball. That alternative motion has... are there any councillors who are abstaining from voting? Councillor Gladys Liu. That alternative motion has failed, and as foreshadowed, I would now request that a alternative motion please be put on the screen. And I'm going to move that alternative motion, and I'm looking for a seconder to that. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And that motion is now before us. I'll now speak to it. Can I begin by thanking the officers for this very, very comprehensive review that has been undertaken of our organisation-wide grants and sponsorship policy. This is a very important review. This City of Melbourne invests over $11 million each year in competitive grants and sponsorships. And boy, oh boy, at the City of Melbourne, do we see those dollars go a long, long way out there in our communities, funding important initiatives from one side of the municipality to the other. These funds shape our creative life, support local businesses, strengthen community connection and activate our city. Until now, programs have operated under separate frameworks, sometimes very confusingly, it needs to be said. The review brings them together under one clear organisation-wide policy to ensure consistency, transparency and alignment with the council plan. for this coming 4 years of this council term. Put it another way, this policy does not change any funding levels, Ariel. You can rest assured of that. But instead, we're looking to modernise our governance of grants and sponsorship. We look to improve public confidence and, above all, ensure our grant making delivers measurable outcomes that deliver the Melbourne that we all want to see. I won't go through the detail of all the work that has been undertaken, but I will just give some really practical examples of the sorts of changes that will occur under this new framework. So we will have, for the first time, consistent quarterly funding rounds to improve predictability and access. We've heard loud and clear from particularly community organisations how quarterly rounds of funding will be so much more practical from their perspective, meaning you don't have that one-off shot often occurring annually to apply for funding. We'll also have much clearer rules on lobbying and conflicts of interest, which are now codified. We also have key themes. So these are the focus area profiles. You referred to those as well, Ariel, in your questions. They have been refined. So, for example, there is now clearer information on the purpose and objectives of funding across business, community, creative industries and events, which I think will be really important guidance. We don't want people in our community to have a PhD in grant applications in order to be able to get important funds from the City of Melbourne to do the good that they do out there in our streets and neighbourhoods and in our communities. And so I think those new guidelines will make it much easier, and that regularity will make it much easier as well to get those important funds and do good for our community. In terms of the change that is here in this alternative motion, essentially it is just a restatement of the current policy at the City of Melbourne around when we make public who has been successful in receiving a grant from the council. And importantly, we do say that we will now require that to be made public as soon as practical, but that will occur after a decision of council has been made. And the reason for that is, as I stated earlier, when we were debating an alternative motion. So with that all said, I do hope this alternative motion will find support amongst councillors. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor, as seconder.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the team led by Rushda Halith for your incredible work on this. It is a significant improvement to the way that we approach grants and our own governance of the grants process. I wanted to use my time briefly to reflect on how important our grants and sponsorship programs are. They deliver value for every part of our community. There is no doubt that our business support grants and our events grants have been a lifeline, quite frankly, to many businesses, particularly in recent years, that the visitation driven by our events program has been the difference between businesses being able to hold on and becoming a vibrant part of our economy or not. So my firm view is that this is an excellent use of ratepayer money. But on a different level, we know that some of our other grants, particularly our community grants, are not just about delivering value for money. They are about delivering life-changing, in some cases life-saving programs, from access to food for those who cannot afford it, access to cool places for those who do not have their own respite at home. These are community-shaping programs that I am so proud the City of Melbourne has been able to support in the past, but I'm particularly delighted that we now have this new framework to ensure that we are administering our grants with those more robust governance rules in place. In closing, I would strongly encourage my councillor colleagues who are looking to deliver value to every part of our community to support the motion before you tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? I can see Councillor Dr Ball has her electronic hand raised. Over to you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment and I'm open to the meeting to decide whether to consider it separately. But if you would like to see what it is, if I could ask Council Business to add it. What I had in mind was if we added a colon after subject to have the current blue text as, say, 5.1.1, and then add a new amendment as 5.1.2, which is in effect adopting the draft policy subject to these two changes. So subject to would need to be after frameworks with a colon, subject to two things. Subject to...
So sorry, just to keep track here. So there's an alternative motion that is currently
I'm not
before us.
changing anything you've written. I'm just changing the punctuation, if you'll allow. So put a colon there and a hard return, and that would be 5.1.1. Thank you. That's perfect. Yep. And then at the end of that blue para, put a semicolon and then hard return 5.1.2, and my text that I've sent previously. No, what happened?
I think you're...
Lovely. Okay. I think that reads okay. Subject to relevant sections of the policy being amended to recommend that the annual budget cycle give consideration to adjusting overall grants and sponsorship funding levels with regard for the Consumer Price Index. I can speak to that now, or...
All right, well, so you're moving that amendment. Is there a seconder for that amendment? I don't believe there's a seconder for that amendment. Look, I'm happy to second it, so you have the opportunity to put the case to us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
No, I can't. Sorry, I can't move an amendment. I can't.
Andrew.
I'll second it to get the debate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rouse. There's a seconder there, so you can speak to it, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm just very conscious that without indexing the overall grant envelope for whatever the sector, whatever the type of grant, including, of course, our neighbourhood house grants, which are not included in this policy, but whatever the grants are, they will erode in value over time, in real value, if they are not indexed to some valid marker, such as the Consumer Price Index. We like to give out nice round figures like $2,000 or $20,000, but if that is not indexed, it's far too infrequent that we would then take the step of increasing that $2,000, those small grants, or whatever the magnitude is. It will erode over time until such time as we say, let's pick another larger round number and increase it. So while it might be messy to increase with Consumer Price Index, it's the only way I can see to reliably maintain the real value of these grants that we've all, and I endorse and agree with everything that's been said, and I won't repeat, the value of these grants to the public and the benefit to our community of these grants. To maintain those benefits, the value of these grants must be maintained. I would like to point out to my colleagues that this clause, if added to the policy, is simply a way of noting in the policy, a policy position that we want to maintain the real value of our grants to the community in all these different ways. It's a non-binding addition to the policy. It's recommending that all councils of the future, as they consider their budget in each cycle, have a mind to the real value of our grants to the community, to the business sector and all those other sectors, and consider increasing the overall grant envelope by something akin to the CPI. So it's a non-binding addition to point that out and to keep that in front of mind for all subsequent councils, including this term.
All right, thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Rouse, did you want to speak to the proposed amendment? Would any other councillors like to speak to the proposed amendment? Over to you, Councillor Guest.
Can I just clarify, am I speaking to one or both?
At this stage, we are debating the proposed amendment.
Which is your
5.1.2.
Okay.
The CPI
amendment. Thank you. Okay.
Councillor Ball has moved.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just quickly, I'd make the point that grants and sponsorship are a privilege. They're not a right. So any idea of maintaining a dollar value in this area, I think it's one of these rare exceptions where I wouldn't put CPI towards it. We should be looking for value, as I hope we do, to the community as to how much we should be putting into one sector, of whether it's business or any other part of the community. Linking it to the CPI in this instance is inappropriate. I think we lose that concept. No one has a right to an ongoing grant or an expectation. It's a privilege, not a right. So I don't actually support this amendment.
All right. Councillor Philip Leilou.
I've got questions, so, Mans, I'm sorry to put this because obviously this is surprised on us. I guess, one, I'm really keen to just understand, I'm not against, increasing grants where appropriate, but to link everything up to CPI, I'm just trying to work out the numbers and what it would mean. Because we are capped at the rate cap, we have a rate cap, right? And our revenue at a certain touch. So if we are going by the CPI and we have no new source of revenue, I guess one to you, Mans, and you can take it on notice, but what dollar figure impact would look like? Two, for those who probably don't know what CPI is, what would be the CPI number that we're forecasting? And three, I guess if we do approve this CPI, I guess I want to know what areas we're going to cut, because we can't just we can't 1 + 1 does not equal to 3. 1 + 1 must equal to 2. So out of those three, can you just give us clarity before we vote so that we have a better understanding of this?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Leilou, and through you, Lord Mayor. So given that I'm just seeing this now, CPI is generally between 3 and 3.5%, I would say. The rate cap is currently 2.75%. So to the Lord Mayor's point earlier, if we were to look at $12 million of community grants, it's between $360,000 and $400,000 on top of that $12 million on an annual basis, which compounds. So 12 million becomes 12.4, and then 12.4 has another 3%, 3.5% on top of that. But if I'm listening to what I think Councillor Ball is proposing is, so we have different types of grants. We have multi-year grants, so it's the same recipient. We commit to a grant to them for a period of years. And then we have the one-off grants. But I think what Councillor Ball's proposing would apply to multi-year grants, and I'd have to take on notice what component of the $12 million forms multi-year grants. Did I answer the three parts of your question, Councillor Leilou?
If I may, that's not what I was suggesting, Mans.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ball. So your view would be all $12 million that are currently...
I'm talking about the overall envelope, yes. Yeah. And it's just a recommendation to this council and future councils for consideration. It would be not binding, but to consider what is the CPI, what are the expenses of the organisations that we are funding, and therefore what can they do with that amount if the real value of that amount is eroding over time.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball. So then my initial figures would stand at about $360,000 to $400,000 increase year on year, which is compounded. And to your final point, Councillor Lelu, as part of the annual planning and budget process, if council chose to apply CPI to the grants, we would have to have a conversation with councillors as to where we would reduce an equivalent amount across the annual budget.
Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And again, man's apology to sort of spring questions on you in light of this. I'm just trying to understand what the effect of this clause would be in a practical sense in terms of when we sit down to do our budget process. I don't believe there's any other sort of standalone motion from a previous council that says how we conduct our budget processes. Normally it's guided by management. Again, this motion or this amendment isn't a clear, we will increase it by CPI. So I'm just wondering what the effect of this clause is, if you're able to talk us through that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Griffiths. And again, for you, Lord Mayor, I don't think there's anything in the current processes that stops councillors from increasing the annual grants budget on an annual basis now. This clause is basically, I think, from my perspective, would be that we would consider it every year. So part of our process, there'd be a step that says, would you consider applying a CPI increase to the overall grants fund? Whereas today, if it's raised by a councillor or it's raised by management, it would be considered by councillors.
Yeah. So thanks for moving this amendment, Councillor Ball. I'm quite torn on this amendment, actually, because on the one hand, I don't want to see the value of our grants programs eroded by inflation. Equally, I know we are in a very invidious position here in local government where we are subject to a state government imposed rates cap, and we each year have to try and make ends meet within that rates cap. And so if we start having programs that are linked to CPI, and CPI is often higher than the rates cap, and even if it's as worded as Councillor Ball has cleverly done here by just making it something that we consider, but nonetheless that creates a public expectation, if you like, then I would say overall that's not good budget practice. So we're subject to a rates cap. As you gave the example of this year, 2.75%. We're facing CPI of, let's say, 3.5%. If we start indexing our expenditure programs by 3.5%, we're going to be in even more financial challenging situation than we already are. So I think from a fundamental good budgeting principles approach, I can't support this amendment, but I certainly would think that each year, as part of our budget process, we would look at the headline amount that we are giving to competitive grants and sponsorships and ask ourselves, are we in a position this year to give more to that area? And I certainly, for one, would advocate for us doing so whenever we have the financial capacity to do so. Would any other councillors like to speak to this amendment? If not, I will give Councillor Ball a right of reply. Back to you. Oh, there's no right of reply.
I don't have a right of reply. I have a question.
You've got a question. Over to you, Councillor Ball.
For you, Lord Mayor, with a view to your comments just now, whether it would help if the amendment said, instead of the CPI, with regard to the rates cap. Would that change your position?
I still have a problem with this as, I guess, a principle of financial management where we start linking expenditure programs to external indexes. That's not generally good financial practice. That's why governments across the board don't generally index their grants programs. But to repeat the point, I'm very strongly supportive of the sentiment and the objective that you're trying to achieve here. I just think that creating an expectation around an indexation factor is not a good budgeting practice. All right, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Ball and Councillor Scott. All those against, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Liu, Councillor Guest, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rouse and Councillor Camillo. Any councillors abstaining? I think Councillor Laylu is abstaining. Yes, you are. Okay. So that amendment has failed. So we'll now return to the alternative motion, which was on the screen before. Do any councillors wish to speak to this alternative motion who haven't yet spoken? I have already spoken to this as the mover.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yes. And Rashina has spoken to it as the seconder. Does anybody else wish to speak to it? Councillor Guest, over to you.
All right.
This is why we structured it in this way.
Yes, it's we're getting there, and I hope. I think if I was going to say something positive about this particular amendment, Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, I do commend you on your audacity. I'm looking, Rushta, I now appreciate a little bit more about what you've been working through and your team putting the policy you have put together. To get to the guts of it here, you're asking us to maintain the status quo as how we release information regarding applicants for grants and sponsorship, and that is to keep them in closed session. And I've never seen a management process and outcomes that are enhanced by secrecy. This is not what good transparency is about, not what good governance is about. I urge you to reconsider this, Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor. The City of Melbourne can do better than this. We can do better than this. Openness is not something to be frightened of. We can still have a good and productive grants and sponsorship policy, but we can also do it in a way that engenders trust from those who are paying the bills and putting their trust in us. I don't think this is the right way to go forward. Could say more, but I think that's it in a nutshell.
All right, thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any other councillors like to speak to this alternative motion? Just as a way of right of reply, good governance actually does require confidentiality in the certain circumstances, certainly when it involves organisations potentially providing sensitive commercial details as part of their grant application, certainly when it might prejudice organisations who might miss out, when it might cause public embarrassment or loss of face to a good community organisation because they missed out. This policy will lead to a very significant enhancement of transparency and good governance across our grants and sponsorship programs, and I do hope that this alternative motion will meet with councillor support. All right, let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Ball. All those against. Councillor Guest.
Is your microphone on, Lord Mayor?
I'm very sorry.
Thank you.
Can I just check with the governance team? Do you need me to go through that vote again for the sake? Okay, got that. All right. Councillor, I've counted your vote in the affirmative, Councillor Ball, to be sure. And councillors against, I've got Councillor Guest and councillors abstaining, Councillor Camillo, and I believe Councillor Laylu as well. So that alternative motion has passed. All right, we now move on to agenda item 7 as reports from management have concluded. There are no items of general business. We move on to urgent business. I don't believe there are any items of urgent business. We move on to agenda item 9, public questions. There's another 15 minutes that have been set aside for public questions. Anybody got any public questions? I see Chris Thrum waving his hand there. Please make your way to the lectern, Chris Thrum, for your question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, councillors, management team, general public and viewers and listeners at home. Sunday's a noteworthy and remarkable landmark day because it's going to be International Women's Day, March the 8th, and also to be the Australian Grand Prix as well for the Rev Heads. But in terms of International Women's Day, I was inspired by Councillor Andrew Rouse, who was describing an experience that he had today listening to a radio station. And for mine, on Tuesdays, I like listening to Uncommon Sense on Triple R. I find it's a good analysis of politics, foreign affairs, government matters and what have you. You seem to have a nuanced, subtle, sophisticated approach to discussing and analysing things. It might be a different radio station to what you're used to listening to on a Tuesday morning. But Triple R will be broadcasting on International Women's Day on Sunday, the March the 8th, and they've got a spectacular array of programs that they'll be broadcasting. So my question to City of Melbourne is, could the City of Melbourne councillors and management team consider listening in to 3RRR 102.7 on Sunday, International Women's Day, and experience quality radio broadcasting?
All right. Would you like to respond to that question, Councillor Leilu, as our arts lead?
Yeah. Consider it done, Chris. I'll make sure everyone here gets, get that notification.
And just a follow-up, but appreciate councillors and management to recognise that Triple R has an on-demand section too, where you can listen back to previous great quality radio programs. So if you're having a problem listening to a certain station and you have issues with it, go to 3RRR's website and you'll have a lot of quality material to listen to.
Long may it rock, Triple R. Thank you very much for that, Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum. All right, any other public questions? No. In that case, we move to agenda item 10. For some, this will be their favourite part of this meeting. We close our meeting this evening, and I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this meeting closed at 7:27 p.m. Thank you, one and all.